Hi there. Another book about the martial arts. And this book is about the history of the mixed martial arts. Now, a lot of people were very intrigued about the idea of which martial art would win against another. But separately from that, there were a lot of us who actually did mix up the martial arts. We trained in a lot of different things. For example, Terry O'Neill had done both judo and aikido uh, to a certain level, as well, and wrestling, amateur wrestling, as well as obviously Shotokan. And we trained together when he lived in Manchester, and we'd go to the park and we'd spend literally hours grappling. Um, Now he was technically better than I was and stronger than I was. So for me, it was a big defensive thing. But I learned a lot about grappling, about locks and escapes and things like that. And at the same time, I was training karate. So that was by no means unusual. You know, one of the guys Terry worked with on the door, Tony Buck, who was a world class wrestler, had boxed in the army and had won medals at that. So people did mix things up just for obvious reasons. You know, people saw the utility in it. But that question about which was best kind of resonated with people, and there were a lot of experiments. And this book that I'm going to talk about really charts the that evolution. It's No Holds Barred by Clyde Gentry, the story of the Ultimate Fighters, and he goes right back into the history, but the more recent history was things like the some of the fights in what became known as kickboxing in America with Joe Louis. Now, Joe Louis came to Liverpool. He did a seminar. And he told us about this. He said, you know, he was a point fighter, no contact, but some promoter got the idea of doing this full contact thing. So Joe went away and trained in a boxing gym in LA. And he said it was hard, really hard. But the guy he fought had never done any full contact at all. This was his first experience, and just thought that his existing skill would do it. And Joe Lewis was all over him, and I think he knocked him out. So that's all described in this book, that kind of evolution. And then he talks about the Gracie family and the rise of that. Now, when I was given this book several years ago, and uh, I thought perhaps it'd be a kind of hagiography of the Gracie family and so on. But the title "No Holds Barred," it is actually a no holds barred look at the history as well. He doesn't pull any punches, um, and it's warts and all. So he tells all sides of the story. And he talked about the evolution of the Gracies in Brazil and so on. And then when Horian came to the United States, and was kind of the both the technical and the business founder in America. And he talks about the disputes with various other branches of the family and so on, and tries to get something going with Benny Erkades. That falls through. Anyway, there's the idea of the UFC comes up, and one of the people involved is John Milius, the film director and writer, and it comes to fruition, and they actually get it together. The idea of putting this contest on. Now, originally, Horian wanted Hickson, who was kind of the family champion, to take part, but they'd fallen out and they couldn't agree on money. So Hoyce, who was kind of the junior in the whole setup, was made to be the face of the Gracie family in this. And there was people like Patrick Smith, who was a kickboxer, Ken Shamrock, who had done some of this kind of stuff in Japan, were competing. In the event, when it all happened, Shamrock defeated Patrick Smith with an ankle lock, much to Smith's disgust, because he had to tap out, and I don't think he thought it was a fair fight, as a lot of punchers tend to think when they are submitted. And then in the final, Hoyce chokes out Ken Shamrock. And I would think it's true to say that it was a big wake-up call to the whole of the martial arts world that this happened. And it goes on from there, and the evolution from that first one and so on. Now, an interesting part of the story is John McCarthy, who was an LAPD officer, Big John McCarthy, because he is a massive unit. And I was interested to find out that actually he is the son of Ron McCarthy. And Ron McCarthy is really well known in the tactical training industry. He was one of the founders of LAPD SWAT, and one of the driving forces behind the National Tactical Officers Association. So he's really well known in the tactical side. And his son is Big John. And after the Rodney King, when Rodney King was seen on video resisting arrest by the LAPD, Rodney being a saint, of course, and there was riots after the verdict. And there was a civilian review board formed that had to approve and modify the use of force training in LAPD. And so they were evaluating all these different systems of use of force. And John McCarthy was the police officer, because he was regarded as an expert in defensive tactics, who had to evaluate them all. And most of them were just nonsense. They wouldn't work, they were just theory, until the Gracies, I think it was Horian, came along with BJJ. And it was a big wake-up call for John McCarthy. He saw that it worked in being able to restrain people and so on, and he started training at the dojo, and then he became co-opted into helping organize the first UFC, and he did things like even setting up the chairs and stuff like that. And then they asked him to be the referee, and he quickly realized that he could only do this if they changed the rules, and he was allowed to actually stop the fights and so on. Because even though it's called no holds barred, there were eye pokes and groin strikes weren't allowed, for example. So he got involved, and he became, and still is to this day, the foremost referee in the system. So the book goes into the whole swathe of the history. Things like one chapter is called The Age of the Wrestler, when the wrestlers came in. People like Mark Coleman, the Hammer, Mark Kerr, people like that. Going into other organizations that sprung up. Trying to get into New York unsuccessfully. And the problems with TV, and then the problems with legislation, in particular with John McCain, who was a senator. And when you read the nonsense that politicians were talking about the dangers of mixed martial arts and comparing it to boxing, it was just absolute nonsense, and they put John McCarthy up to argue against him. Anyway, the whole story's in here. All the big names, people like a favourite of mine, Baz Rutten, it's got his story in there, a remarkable character. People like Randy Couture and all of them. It's the whole story, and it's written very, very well. I find even the stuff about the corruption and the politics and the backroom dealing, it was all made very, very interesting in the book. And uh, I've always really been grateful to the UFC because it's given us a new sport in the world. It's not often that a sport breaks through and becomes a mass appeal sport, and the UFC has. And it's also given us a lot of enjoyment over the years. I think I've watched every UFC, certainly every main event, and I've enjoyed them thoroughly. And the book um, does really cover the story in great detail. And obviously, I think it was written in, I'll just give you the 2002. Uh, and I think this is a slightly later edition, actually published by Milo. And so obviously, a lot happened since then. But the early part of the story is really fascinating, and you can see the evolution of the art to what it is today, where the skill levels are just off the chart. So really recommend it.